So the second to last day of 2022. How are you doing, Professor?
I'm great, thanks.
Good.
Feeling
Did you finally recover from your illnesses and ailments as I have?
Yeah, I think so. My voice feels the same. It's funny. Once you get healthy, you forget being sick, right?
Oh, ain't that the truth? But man, this last one I had, I went and got another COVID shot just because in case it wasn't COVID, and it was, I don't know, I was pretty bad for a week or two, and I decided I didn't want to be bad for another week or two. And
Yeah, but the bad part is, and you're a daily runner, so you know how this feels, but I stopped swimming and now I feel bad because of my lack of exercise,
oh
I
yeah.
need to get back into my routine,
Yeah, please do that because there is a lot of truth to that. I run every single day and I get a health assessment every single day. And when I just could barely breathe and waddling around the neighborhood, no, I'm not feeling good. I have proof. I can look at my watch and go, wow, that's barely walking. Okay.
Braver than me. I just stopped swimming when I was.
No, I know. Start up again. You're better when you do. Well, you're good when you don't do it, but it helps you. So pick it up again. All right. So Professor, we're going to go back and forth on this. I don't think we've ever done one like this, so get ready.
All right,
You want to
ready.
go first or second?
I don't care. I don't even know what we're doing yet. So
All right, pick one, first or second.
I'll go first.
Okay, what was the most important event of 2022 for America?
Oh boy. Uh, wow. Um, for America, I guess I go short term and long term.
No, you got to pick one
Okay,
because
all
we're
right.
going to go back and forth.
Support for the war in Ukraine. Support for the war in Ukraine.
Yeah, Ukraine. That's an excellent answer. So, Ukraine, are we really aren't we at war? I know we're not at war. We haven't declared war. We don't have our troops on the ground. Yes, we probably do, by the way. We probably have troops on the ground, and everybody will swear that we don't. I get it. But you can't use all these sophisticated missile systems and without somebody on the ground. Maybe they're not troops. Maybe they're CIA. And I don't know. Maybe I lose my security clearance by even talking this way. But there's got to be troops on the ground in some fashion, if not in the air, and it's even better than being on the ground. Aren't we at war, Professor?
No.
Talk to me. Why not?
Well, because nothing is war. Nothing is war but war. It's one of those analogies that I really resist. I don't like comparing anything to war that isn't war. And the American way of war is all out and violent and involves American casualties and American soldiers involved in combat. And until we get to that point, then I'm not willing to call it a war.
Okay.
The same with, I try to hold that standard. There's a nice book, if anybody's interested in all the small wars in American history, called The Savage Wars of Peace by Max Boot, written before he kind of went on his political journey, whatever that is. But if you're interested in all the small wars in American history, it's a great read. I used to assign it in my classes. But that being said, if we're not engaged in combat, then I don't call it a war.
Okay. All right. That's great discussion thus far. But you would agree that the Ukrainian war, or maybe the Russian war against Ukraine and their defense, whatever we call it, and American support of it, / European Union, but basically American money with some other support from the EU, is probably one of the most significant events of the last 125 years, isn't it? I mean, we had a Cold War for 50 years, and that has filled tombs of history books. This is more than a Cold War, isn't it? I mean, it may not be a war, but it's more than a Cold War, isn't it?
I don't think I'd put it on par with the Cold War, where we threatened the continued existence of mankind. I would put this more on par with what should have been done before World War I and World War II. Meaning,
you stop it. You just put in a lot of resources to stop it before it becomes a war.
Right. In other words, the success of Ukraine against Russia is what prevented us from going into a world war 3 years from now.
Yeah. Okay. So one final question on this, and you're welcome to add because it was your number one thing that was important in 2022. I'm surprised that others are surprised. I think it was France and Macron, or maybe it was, I don't know who it was, but I read an article recently that said, hey, fellow European leaders, we're dependent on America for our defense. We should be probably doing more. And that so surprises me because maybe I learned that in 1983 in Air Force ROTC in college up at UNC. I mean, that's what America does is we put a lot of resources in to defend people around the world against communism or other fascism or other dictatorships. It's kind of what we do. I mean, we want to be doing that, and they've wanted to accept that bargain, and it's given them great abilities to care for their citizens in other ways, in some ways that we don't have, healthcare. So it kind of surprises me. I mean, Trump said, hey, you guys aren't living up to your bar. You need to be doing more. That was 5 years ago. All this surprises me. That this grand bargain wasn't a secret. I mean, this is what we do as America, right? Or am I wrong?
I think it's what we do when we have a semi-normal president. So it is what we normally do. But we've had some bad presidents and bad periods of diplomatic history and choices in the past. So it is what we have typically done over the past 150 years.
Say that last statement again.
Oh, it's what we've done over the past 100, roughly, for the most part, over the past 150 years.
Well, more than what, 60% of our country's history?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you agree with my assessment?
Yes.
I know I'm unsophisticated. I'm not a college professor, but.
Well, I just think that I hate to. It's part of what's amazing about the United States is what we do is remarkable, and it seems so normal to us. So I never want to lose that sense of like wonder or
I love that
what we think that this extraordinary thing it is normal to us, but it is not normal in the context of world history or global.
Love that point. Love that point. Tony, do you want to jump in on this, or is this conversation Professor Tootle's number one? Are you comfortable with that, or did I miss any follow-up questions for him?
No, I think you got it.
Okay, cool. You ready for my number one?
Yeah, hit it.
Rich people, i.e. Elon Musk, owning a major communications channel, i.e. media, publication, newspaper. Oh my gosh, this is brand new. We must stop it. This has never happened before. Rich people have not owned sources of communication. That's a big news in 2022, and it's different than in our history.
Are you joking right now?
Right now, I'm ready for your questions, your retort.
That it is not new. It's and it's not even rare, and that is an incorrect answer.
Well, what do you mean? It's my number one. My number one, our number two. That's all we talk about is Elon Musk and Twitter. This is big news, Professor.
I don't talk about that. I mean, every media outlet is owned by either rich people or a bunch of rich people. So
what?
I don't see, and I don't see. I mean, essentially, it's one of those misunderstood aspects of campaign finance reform was the Supreme Court just sort of declined to say that what is a news organization, because news organizations are for-profit corporations, and if you're a for-profit corporation and you're putting information out there, then all they were saying is that the Supreme Court is not in the business of saying like this is a legitimate one because it's called the Washington Post and it's owned by Jeff Bezos, and this is an illegitimate one because it's owned by somebody you've never heard of.
Well, fine, Professor, but this is not what our founders were looking for. I mean, Ben Franklin would be rolling in his grave if he knew rich people had an influence over communication channels, correct?
Ben Franklin was a rich person when he owned those communication channels. He was an Elon Musk.
What?
I mean, he wasn't one of the richest people in the world, but he was certainly one of the wealthier people in Pennsylvania.
And likely one of the most influential people in the world. But what?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was. I mean, people listened to him the way that they would have listened to
Trump's tweets.
Tweet. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so you don't like my number 2, huh?
No.
All right. Well, that's why you're a professor and I'm not. So let's go to the number 2 from Professor Tootle, which will be our number 3, although we'll see if it keeps bumping down the list. What's the second most important thing that happened in America in 2022? And I'll ask you questions.
Oh, I mean, I would just say it could be the most important thing, but that would be advances in fusion technology. We get cold fusion, 20, 30 years down the road, and it's practical. That will be a revolutionary change.
But it's a perpetual motion machine, isn't it? I mean, in all practical terms, if it works, if we can figure it out, it's finally a perpetual motion machine that solves all these old battles we've been fighting for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Well, yes and no. It's still going to require resources to make and maintain, so it will still require some form of energy, but the magic formula is, can it produce more energy than it consumes? And that might be a long journey, but we might get there.
Okay, so more significant than fission.
Yes.
Or they're just different.
Yes. Well, more significant in that it doesn't have the waste product. But I'm a big fan of nuclear energy and nuclear power in general. So I do think that people tend to make the waste product to be a worse than it really is. But there are also dangers inherent in fission that are not inherent in fusion. So
right, more significant than the oil and gas industry or coal. I mean, the Industrial Revolution.
I don't know. It remains to be seen. I mean, it's as Joe Strummer used to say, the future is unwritten. We just merely having this technology does not in any way mean that human beings are going to use it and use it properly and use it well and distribute it. I mean, my own state of California, we've had the ability to have nuclear power and desalination plants, and we just continue to make bad choices so that we don't have these. And just having the technology is not enough. You have to have the leadership and social leadership and social pressure and education, and people have to want it and be willing to pay for it and subsidize it until it works. And
Cool.
There are a lot of things that go into the successful implementation. It can't just exist on a drawing board somewhere.
Cool. Tony, do you like the professor's number 2? And do you have any follow-up questions?
I like the number 2 a lot. It's better than your number 1 for sure.
Well, this is not a comparison.
I mean, on the list, it should be number 2, not 3, but
I'm still number 3 on my list. Okay, so let's keep with a theme.
I really wish I had thought about this before. Are we going to keep doing this?
Yeah, we're going to keep doing this. You've got like minutes to think, Professor, while we're talking.
Oh my goodness.
All right, but I'm going to make this easy for you since the number 1, 2, and 3 was so fun. I'm going to make this easy for you.
Okay.
Number 4, the most important thing in America in 2022 is gun violence. This is ridiculous, Professor. There were some very just catastrophic, horrible deaths of innocents through guns in America, and other countries around the world don't have that. And we must have the resolve, finally, in 2022, not that the other years and all those other tragedies. Thoughts and prayers, Professor, thoughts and prayers. This is the one where we have to stop gun violence. It is, the tipping point happened in 2022. That's my number 4. You like it?
I don't. It's a hard one to answer because you don't want to diminish the
And I don't mean to be flippant on the real world stuff. Thank you.
the tragedies. But actually, I would guess I would point people, if it's too bad Jake's not here because he could do this. Kevin Williamson over at the Dispatch just put up a gun explainer that he intends to continue to edit and add to. And it really is a frequently asked question response about gun violence and firearms that gets at most of the easy assertions and easy answers that most people have, and so I would just recommend to anybody who's interested in at least getting past the easy answers that people give at cocktail parties to read that explainer and take those things into account before you begin offering solutions. The solution to almost every social problem is having parents who love you and a supportive family. That's it's hard to solve social problems that are downstream from that. You know, as the explainer points out, that most of the laws and regulations aren't enforced against people who actually commit crimes. And until we're willing to actually enforce the laws that are already on the books, and our legal system is prepared to do so, it's kind of like the immigration crisis in a way. You know, passing laws is not adequate. Because often lawmakers pass laws that are completely unenforceable because they underestimate the scale of the problem, or they're unwilling to actually deal with the consequences of actually enforcing these laws, because the enforcement falls on local and county and state officials to in many cases deal with these issues.
Or they're arresting real people's family members who are in crisis that society goes, stop that. I mean, yeah, it's a weird paradox.
We often have the same person who says that we have a problem of mass incarceration in this country, and at the same time saying we need to enforce gun laws. And you have to, those two things are mutually exclusive. You have to do either one or the other, because enforcing gun laws in this country would result in mass incarceration. So you have to decide, and this is what, you know, kind of it's grown-up time, right? Like, you have to decide. You can't have it both. You can't have both. You can do one or the other. And because these are non-violent gun crimes that are going unenforced that lead to violent gun crimes. So
you like my number two?
Not really, because it's also not unique to the year 2022.
Right.
So I would just say this is another, I mean, you could pick almost any social problem and say, where are we at in the year 2022?
But you got to admit, everybody's talking about mine, not yours so far. We're 2 and 2, right? And people are talking about mine, right?
I don't know how we would even measure that sort of thing.
Well, look at Facebook. That's the authoritative water cooler or Twitter, maybe. I don't know.
I don't think so, but
okay. All right.
Facebook measure such a tiny fraction of the country.
All right. Well, since you're insulting me on my first two, I'm going to let you go for a third one. What is the third priority? What happened in 2022 that was significant? What was important in America?
Boy, that is, you know, I think, this is hard because I think it's going to be a sort of 2 to 3 year project, but I think the direction of the Supreme Court is probably the next most significant uh, trend that really got underway. And we don't really have it's not a 5-4 Supreme Court. It's more like a 3-3-3 Supreme Court. And you really only have two justices that don't have a lot of influence. So it's a very unique time in the history of the Supreme Court where 7 of the 9 justices are able to negotiate and be listened to and taken seriously and win people over to arguments. And so I think how some of these cases are coming out is by and large good. You know, I won't, there's never been a single Supreme Court ruling where I've ever agreed with everything that was in it. But I think that we are getting better Supreme Court rulings, maybe than at any other time in American history, which is we have some of the best qualified, most thoughtful justices we've ever had. It's across the board.
So 55% of Americans would disagree with your last statement. However, 90% of Americans would probably agree with you as that's one of the most significant things of this 2020 in the history compared to the history of the country. The Supreme Court decisions is a really big deal. So I want to congratulate you for a third time. You're 3 for 3, Ukraine, fusion, and Supreme Court decisions. Do you agree that you're wise?
Yes, but I think that you know, the numbers on the Supreme Court, I would say it's such a highly specialized, highly technical branch of government that I don't know that that many people disagree with it. Because most people look at Supreme Court decisions and what they look at are the outcomes, which is
why they disagree with you. They look at the outcomes and they're mad.
That's not the way that they're even supposed to approach the law, you know.
Correct.
So I would say most people are using the wrong metric to judge the decision.
Sure. And we've talked about that once, and it's probably worthy of talking again, especially as new decisions keep unveiling that will make.
So a lot of correct Supreme Court decisions have terrible outcomes.
Yeah.
You know, supporting free speech for Nazis results in Nazis being able to spread hate speech, you know, but that is the correct decision. And thus, you know, you can't look at a public opinion poll that judges the outcome, because what people will answer is, do I like the outcome of this decision? So until I see a public opinion poll that actually asks about the underlying principle that was actually being settled by the Supreme Court, I'm not going to credit that poll.
Fair enough. So you stand by my opinion that most citizens are probably upset by a bare majority, but almost everyone would agree that the Supreme Court decisions are a major impact in 2022 throughout U.S. history. This is a big year, and it's going to be the foretelling of future years, most likely.
I think so.
Yeah, cool. Tony, questions, comments? Professor's 3 for 3, and I'm 2 for 2. This is the top 5 seem to be in order so far. Agree, or questions for the professor?
Yeah, it's all good. Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
All right, so Professor, I'm going to keep with my theme since you're 3 for 3. I kind of like mine too, so I'm going to stick with my theme. Ready for this?
Yeah.
The number 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 5. Oh, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, number 6, the most important thing in 2022 was the Democratic committee chairman, plus majority of the committee apparently, releasing former President Trump's tax returns. Just the data makes it interesting that you release it on a former president. But the principle of government releasing private records to the American public, I think is going to be a really bad precedent. There's going to be so many unintended consequences of this for future decades. Every person that we hate, liberal or conservative or old or young or black or white or gun or gay, or I mean, you just take every imaginable issue, and we must know their tax returns. How are we an informed public? We have to know their tax committee in Congress, release them to us, not to you, so you can analyze whether the tax system is fair or not. Release them to us so we can put our judgment on them. I think the number 6 most important thing that happened in 2022 was releasing former President Trump's tax returns to us. It's a horrible mistake.
Disagree. First of all, I disagree that it's significant, because I think that the tax returns themselves are so overly complicated that what will happen is that people who support President Trump will simply either say they will believe whatever spin, his defenders put on the tax returns, or they will get confused in the minutia of it, or simply say, we already knew this, there's nothing new. So I think that it's not going to convince anyone of anything. And then second, it's not significant, and it won't have the result that you suggested, simply because every other presidential candidate had always done it. He was the first president in a long time who hadn't released his tax returns. And I think that I agree with the sentiment that too much is made of financial disclosures by politicians. However, we have seen instances of actual corruption that have been uncovered because of these disclosures. It's not, and the other thing is, it doesn't matter who you are, you have to if you're any kind of public official. I don't know what the law is in Colorado, or I don't know what law I was following, but I've been elected and appointed to different public offices where I had to disclose all of my finances. I don't know, and I assume those were available to the public if they asked for it. And I find it strange to assume that that somehow this is going to lead to a flood of people avoiding public office when it's been.
So you really think this is a nothing burger?
It is not a nothing. It depends on what we do with it. Because if we look at Donald Trump's, here's what, in my perfect world, there is a way that this could not be a nothing burger, which is that if we would simply say to ourselves that what we want is to stop the business of using the tax code to incentivize behavior, because I find it odious. People tend to focus on the regulation side, of conservatives and liberals, but to me, the tax code and the law are one and the same, in that they are things that incentivize behavior. And generally speaking, I want less of that across the board. So I would like it if we had a tax system where sort of everybody paid, and it was simple, and it didn't incentivize anyone's behavior ever. And only because, and this does not mean that I'm an advocate of the flat tax or anything like that, but I find that and I know this is an impossibility, but so what I'm asking for is just impossible to imagine. But I would love it if we somehow had a tax system in this country that did not incentivize our behavior, and simply was designed around the idea of raising money to give money to the government.
For public good.
Yeah,
that
I know it's it's such a strange but fundamental question that nobody asks, which is, what are taxes supposed to do? And excuse me.
After we both just bragged about being healthy again and both of us are coughing occasionally. Yikes. You want me to talk for a little bit? All right. So I think we've beaten this up enough unless Tony has a question, but you're 3, I'm 3. We both agree. Oh gosh, he's leaving, Tony. So now it's a conversation with you and me. We both agree that our comments are equally important. The top 6 issues that Americans have faced in 2022. Do you have any, well, if he gets back, do you have any questions or comments? Because by the way, Tony, before you answer, Professor, I think you're wrong on this one. I think maybe I'm not speaking clearly or concisely, or you're not hearing me. I think future Congress committees are going to open up to the American people all sorts of folks. We don't like a Hollywood actress. We don't like a local CEO that's done something. We don't like a local candidate for running for somebody, and we're going to release it as a tool. This is a weaponized governmental tool against citizens who may not be running for office. They're just citizens who are engaged in their civic life who we want to stop. I think it's going to be a really bad precedent. I don't care if Congress can look at it. I do care that we as American citizens can look at it. I don't think that's in the law. I think it's illegal for the committee to open it up to us. That was my point. Any retort to that before Tony attempts to criticize you as well?
No, I just don't think it's that big of a deal.
Okay, cool. Tony,
I shouldn't say that. Like, among the stupid and abusive things that Congress has the ability to do, I don't find this to be particularly unique.
Okay, fair enough. Tony, you have any add to that?
No, I think he's right on. I was wondering the same thing. I'm like, well, whatever, with Trump and his taxes. But
my God.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, John, though. I wouldn't like it if down the road, then Congress could decide they don't like me and they're gonna. I mean, not that I have anything to hide, but
Sure you do. Everybody has something to hide. We just don't know what it is, depending on who's in charge.
Yeah.
Huh. Well.
Yeah. I mean, I think of it like the way that my old professor used to describe terror in the Soviet Union. It's like a searchlight, and your local district attorney, if he decided to make your life miserable, could do so. In other words, if you take the power of government and focus it on any individual, it already has within it the ability to abuse people if you get caught up in the gears. And I think in so many cases, when it happens to a poor person, because of when it happens to the working poor, we just don't see it. But when it happens to a high profile rich person, then we all care about it. So, the hardest thing in this country to me is to be someone who is a member of the working poor trying to get into the aspiring middle class, because those are the times when, if you fall within the gears of some large administrative machine, that you can get crushed.
But Professor, it's not I want to emphasize your point. It is not some theoretical working poor issue. It is a red light camera or a speeding ticket, and not be able to afford to pay the speeding ticket, so it doubles because you can't send it in time. And then there's a warrant out for your arrest, and then there's a broken taillight, and pretty soon you're just like, you're really poor. I mean, you can't get out of this. I mean, that's the millions of Americans are actually in that issue every year. They just live their life constantly in dread of their government punishing them a little bit by a $75 ticket or a $150 ticket.
Yeah, but that's because we have this kind of, I don't know if we want to call it like a 3-tiered justice system, where the poor can get away with it because you can't punish them, and the rich can get away with it because they can afford the defense. And thus the only people who are punished by the law are middle-class people and working poor people who are trying to become middle class. And it seems like a rather bizarre way to organize a society. where you're just going to punish the people who are trying. I don't.
Really interesting points. Tony, anything to add?
No, I appreciate that perspective on who's really being impacted. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, cool. And again, Professor, write today's date down. It's December 29th of 2022. 3 to 5 years from now, you're going to go back and go, John, how'd you know that weaponized Congress was going to be going after U.S. citizens in a way that I guess I didn't see? It's a really bad precedent. We should remember this time that we released President Trump's tax returns. It's not a good idea. Anyway, just remember this date. I'm right, you're wrong.
Remember this date, 1952 to 1953. You know, remember, like, I don't, right? Remember this date, 1961 to 1962. You know, these are all times. Remember this date when in 1968, or how about 1970? Well, I guess it'd be 69 through 73. You know, there are a lot of dates when the administrative state went after the private records and released and abused high-profile individuals.
Shocking, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
all right,
we're doing it, and you know what's more abusive, releasing Trump's tax returns or Kennedy going after steel executives? I mean, raiding their homes, and you know, because he thought they were engaged in. You know,
or taping the personal and private conversations of MLK Jr. Reverend. Yeah, I get it. Okay, you are a number 3, 4, and maybe this is your 5th. Maybe we just end at the top 5, and you've already done 3. Well, you have maybe 2 chances left. What's the next most important thing that happened in 2022, and how it compares to the other things throughout U.S. history?
Boy, it gets harder after this, because I think about is there anything in the year 2022 that we're going to care about 100 years from now? I think the next thing would be the mainstreaming of artificial intelligence.
Wow, good.
Because I think we're only the release of and this is complete speculation, but the release of that Chat GPT showing just how many of our tasks could be completed by artificial intelligence, we're just getting the tip of the iceberg for what is possible. And what people are using it for fun is overlooking how many of our tasks do not require creativity. And I think that 100 years from now, if many of the tasks that require creativity will be delineated from the tasks that require rote knowledge. And you think about what this could mean for, I was talking to a former student of mine yesterday who actually listens to the show. So if you're listening, I'm talking about you and our conversation yesterday, but he's an engineer. He was trained as a civil engineer. And everything you need to know as a civil engineer is a formula. It's a problem. And you need to apply that formula to a series of unique problems. But what about being a software engineer? Because you can already teach artificial intelligence to write a computer code that will execute a specific command, and it will just spit out the computer code in the programming language. So a lot of the careers, I used to tell my students, you shouldn't want your job to be mentally difficult, because if it isn't, you will be replaced. I mean, already, the easiest thing in the world is you could put into the Chat GPT, explain to me the causes of the Mexican-American War, and it will give you whatever the internet considers the conventional wisdom on that particular topic, and it will write an authoritative treatise on it for you. I mean, the most absurd, because I wanted to know how specific it would get, and one of my colleagues subscribes to the paid version, and he asked he asked it to write a summary of my dissertation, my personal dissertation, but do it in the style of a Dr. Seuss poem. And it
Oh
did.
my God, you are making this up.
No. So it went onto the internet, found my dissertation, summarized my dissertation, and then wrote a Dr. Seuss poem about my dissertation.
You are making this up.
No,
Is it something you're willing to release, or would you rather keep it private?
no, I mean, I guess I could, but I'd have to look in my email for it. But
Right, though, you got to look in your email for it. This is really fascinating.
but you should just know that if it'll take me a second to find it. But yeah, that we're just beginning to scratch the surface of, because we've always said that artificial intelligence can't handle the ham sandwich problem, which is, it can't do what a human mind can do. It can't walk into a house and make a ham sandwich. But we are getting to the part where it's getting really good at summarizing. Oh, see, I'm requiring some authentication here.
It's all right. Look it up and send it to me if you don't mind. And then tell me whether you'd rather keep it private.
No, I don't care.
Well, if it's good, we got to publish it. This is great.
Well, it's not good. But it is a summary of my dissertation in the style of, let's see. I remember.
All right. So, Professor, look it up later. We're on the show, remember?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought you meant right now.
No, this isn't just like two people talking. We've got a
Well,
conversation.
I thought you were literally asking me.
No. I mean, at some point in your future.
Okay.
All right. So I love your number 5. I think it's number 4 or 5. That's great. Good work. Tony, agree or disagree, or you have any questions?
I think it's great because, like everybody's doing those AI pictures and stuff like that. They're posting them. And I think you're right. We're just barely scratching the surface of it.
When I keep seeing those, I'm kind of in the PR field, and I am in the PR field. And I keep seeing things, stop writing your own stuff. Just let AI write your press releases. And okay, I guess. Wow. Okay.
No, it works for that sort of thing. We've tested it many times for, write a press release for this company, and it will just spit one out, and it will be better than it. If nothing else, it serves as the first draft, that maybe you would want to edit. But what is also evident is that it summarizes whatever other people say and do. And one of the things that's sort of scary is that it repeats conventional wisdom, whether it is correct or not. So
everybody will resonate with it, and that means something.
Well, so one of my colleagues was describing this to his students, and one of his students said, write a Python computer code about who should go to jail, and it said something like, it wrote like, execute this person black, this person male, this young, right? Like, in other words, if you ask it who should go to jail, it will say young black men.
Yikes! You're kidding. Based off crap that humans have put out there.
Right. Exactly. That's the summary that it would come up with. Yeah.
Wow, that's another insightful sub point. Tony, last questions on that?
No, that's cool.
All right, I hope you're going to like my last one, and this is probably my last one. I had 2 others, but I think we're going to run out of time. Our deficit and debt this last year has put it over the top. I thought it was 3 years ago. I thought it was 8 years ago, 7, 6, 5. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And at some point, history is going to look at the time where it just is completely unsustainable and the society crumbles. And I think 2022 is the year that it happened. No one seems to care about spending anymore, whether we have it or not, or whether we can all ever repay it, or what interest rates are going to be. And the whole world's in this problem. It isn't just the US. It just, to me, is madness that we aren't having adult conversations, real conversations on how to care for our society and future generations in the best way. We just want what we want now, and we're just going to spend it, and some magic will take care of it at some point in the future. I think deficit and debt is the news that we're not talking about, but we will be 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years from now.
Yep, agree, 100%.
So I finally got one that you agree with.
Yep.
But was this year the year that it tipped, or was it the pandemic that caused all that spending, or was it?
Well, I think it will be the pandemics in a way. I mean, I guess I'm imagining a future historian 50 or 100 years from now saying, what was the breaking point? And I would say it's when the pandemic spending levels became permanent.
Yeah.
And so that might be this year.
I think it's this year, because I get it when we're all in a complete panic and we have no idea whether millions or hundreds of millions of us are going to die. Okay, we spend a bunch of money. I get that. And I think everybody else got it too. We spent a ton of money. Yeah. But now that most of us have just decided to move on, and it's still a serious issue, by the way. It's still ongoing.
Yeah. But if you think about when we look back at the Great Society spending, right? The 1968 was one of our last balanced budgets. None of those programs were expensive when they were launched. So they became expensive and broke the bank and started exploding deficits in the 1970s. So yeah, we don't say, the Great Society spending broke the bank in 1968, because it didn't. The Great Society spending, or at least that mentality, maybe, and America isn't broken right now because, and in a way, here's another way that this might tie into the events of this year. The only way that the United States could crash is that if we're no longer the reserve currency of the world. Of the world, yeah. And the alternative currency seemed to be things like Bitcoin, or cryptocurrencies. And the collapse of the FTX seems to have turned a lot of people off of the idea of having a currency that is not answerable to a national government. So if, in a way, the collapse of cryptocurrency this year might prevent the United States from collapsing further down into the future, as long as there doesn't seem to be an alternative to the United States as the world's reserve currency. Yeah.
Tony, critique, did I finally give one you liked, or did you leave and not hear it?
No, I heard it. I like that one. That was good. It's concerning. I think you're right. Every year it's like, oh, how much debt can we go into? And individually, I think that's an issue too. So I'm concerned for sure. So
well, and it doesn't seem like our citizen culture, our collective hive, is demanding that our Republicans or Democrats talk about it. We're all just kind of like looking away and hoping something else is going to happen, and it's not my deal. I just don't get it.
It reminds us a little bit of the 1850s, where everybody was just kind of hoping, hey, politicians, solve this issue that none of us want to deal with, because we don't want to deal with how painful it will be until it collapses, and we're on a trajectory now where the interest on the debt is larger than it. The interest on the debt, I think this is true right now, is larger than everything except for Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and defense.
Oh yeah. Oh, it has to be by that. But I think the projection is it's going to be larger than defense in just a few short years.
Yeah, but that's really shocking when you think about every other thing that the federal government does, and how it is just going to force the federal government to sort of eat itself. I mean, the seeds of our own destruction if we don't manage it. And the other thing is, it's going to be so incredibly thankless for the person who actually does. I can already tell you, let me write the political obituary of the president who's brave enough to actually tackle this issue. He's going to be hated and
by everyone, by the way,
driven out of office. And then 50 years after he's dead, we will look back and say he was the person who he or she, right?
The person
who saved America. But it would almost take a president and 2 houses of Congress willing to commit political suicide in order to solve this problem before a collapse.
Right, and we've seen how much courage is been increasing in Congress over the last 30 or 40 or 50 years.
Yeah, there has not only courage, but an unwillingness to even fulfill the basic duties of Congress.
Right. Yeah, committee work. I mean, just plain old up and down votes on items, debate.
Yeah,
we can't even do the
legislation and debate.
Yeah. Okay, so you finally got one that you agree with. Do you have any that I might finally agree with you?
Well, I don't know. I think you were pretty much on board with my.
I know.
With mine. I tend to think about the long-term trajectory as, when I was trying to come up with mine, I was thinking about what really matters to people, and, peace, electricity, water, families, security. And then you sort of say, well, what is it that has the greatest potential for harming those things? And we use this analogy when we were talking about Donald Trump, but we talked about borrowing this metaphor from, I think, Jonathan Haidt, of some things are a heart attack and some things are a cancer. And when we're doing these kinds of 1-year assessments, we're in some ways looking for these heart attacks rather than when did we actually see the evidence of the cancer. So I think our list is made up of some heart attacks and
some cancers. Yeah.
And some cancers.
Well, so Professor, the reason I guess I'll throw my hidden agenda in here at the end, although I think my spheres of influence are becoming better in the last 6 months or year or two, I still think the American citizen, so I'm talking my friends, I don't mean to be all hoity-toity, I'm just talking about real people I know and what they talk about. And besides their marriages and their children and their dogs and their vacations, when they do venture in on how to make society better, it seems to be kind of tribal or pessimistic or really angry towards some group or the other. And this is all across the spectrum. And I just don't see a lot of, and I'm not trying to criticize my friends. They're my friends, and I probably do this too. You see my posts, you probably think I'm the same way. So I don't mean to be critical, but it seems like there's so few people willing to have just a thoughtful conversation on. One of mine that I didn't get to is Roe v. Wade being overturned. You took that by taking with a bigger umbrella of Supreme Court, so I didn't need to talk about Roe v. Wade. But it doesn't seem like we actually are comfortable talking about big issues in society, except in superficial ways, like I threw out in guns, ban them, or whatever. And I guess my last big issue is, and maybe I'm naive, in high school or college, you learned about Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, and these people in white robes sitting around on rocks, solving problems of the world, stroking their beards, thinking big thoughts on the nature of man and the future of their eternal life. I mean, big thinkers. And I haven't, it just seems like we don't have a lot of big thinkers right now. And it's time to go back to some big thinking. And so I am generally pleased with what we've talked about this year. But as my last one, I'd say we need to encourage, I don't know if meritocracy is the right word again, but encourage deep thinking or sophisticated research or admiration for those in the know. I mean, there's all sorts of different ways to look at it, but just this guttural tribal thing, I hope we're getting close to being the end of it. And I know it's not a yay or nay, it's a spectrum. But I hope we're moving away from just the brute force method of argument rather than a give and take, thinking through how to solve problems kind of thing. Does any of this make sense?
It does. And I was just thinking, as you were talking about it, I was thinking about what my big hope would be, and that is, I hope that we get to a point where we start to value human editors who seek truth and who can be shamed. You know,
Say that again. Human editors that seek truth and what?
and who can be shamed. You know, one of the
Wow.
traits I always think about with a human being is like, is this someone who, if you confront them with something, would they feel ashamed? Because if you're someone who doesn't experience shame, then what can we do with you? You know, like there are some people who are completely shameless. They won't feel ashamed when they get caught doing something wrong. So, and then somebody who seeks truth and who can be shamed means that this is somebody who has some kind of a moral center and is trying to do the right thing in terms of putting good information out, which means this is somebody who also changes, someone who changes his or her mind when new information comes out. But you're also somebody who's seeking new information. And the alternative is what we get with AI and what we get with TikTok, which is if you don't value this, advertisers will value it for you. And I think people are starting to wake up to the dangers of TikTok from a security standpoint. But I think we should also worry about the dangers of TikTok from a free media standpoint. And that is not just TikTok itself, but when AI is analyzing what to put in front of you, and you have companies that are valuing just advertising, you know, because in a way, the big media companies that have like a single owner, you know, like a Mark Zuckerberg, he actually, for all of the evil, you know, that results from it, like he can still be shamed. You know, Jeff Bezos, you know, and the Washington Post, like they can still be shamed, but it's these other media companies that are completely unscrupulous that say, well, what I'm going to do for your company is I'm going to, you know, pay an influencer to, you know, push a particular product on TikTok and it will just go completely unnoticed. But you can buy off the top influencers on TikTok pretty cheaply. And then you can measure how much it's influencing behavior in real time. And people who use this power to try to influence human beings, it's a tremendous, I mean, elections are won and lost on tiny margins. So it is and can be a tremendous force for evil in the world, especially in a democratic society. So we need to at least throw some attention and some brain cells behind thinking about how we're going to deal with this. And it's almost one of those problems that can't be dealt with. I mean, maybe there are some legal tools, but the most important thing is, I guess I sort of treat that stuff in my own household. I talk about it with my kids the way I would talk about guns or drugs. I mean, so, you know, the algorithms that put information in front of you, you need to treat them the way you would treat a drug at a party that you might not know if it has fentanyl in it. Like if you don't know where this is coming from, you should absolutely stay away from it, because it might be coming from the American Nazi Party or the Chinese Communist Party, and it is something to be not, you know, you shouldn't just avoid it. You should run in the other direction. So
Professor, that was a really deep thought. So I don't mean to minimize it with a practical example in my own life, but you know, I have a variety of friends, as you may know. You know some of them. You know, and they like this group or that group on Facebook. So over the course of the years or whatever it is, I belong to a variety of groups. And some of them are just humor groups, the far side, and some of them are like debate groups where they debate issues, like Republicans, unaffiliateds, and liberals argue issues, you know, those kind of groups. And I just so happened, over the break here, I've decided to kind of look through and do an assessment, and I belonged to like 180 groups. And that's just way too many. So I think I've canceled like 80 of them so far, and I've got another 50 to go. And there's a couple running groups I really like because they talk about trail conditions and it's just nice. And then there's like a feel good group that I really like because they just have these fun stories they put out every day. But most of them are a little bit not angry, but they're a little bit trite, or like the motorcycle almost death group, and you just watch these people on reels or something, and they're about ready to get wiped out by a train or a plane or a car or a boat or something. And sure, I kind of watch that and go, "Ooh, boy, that was close, man." But why the hell am I watching that? Why do I want to, and who's paying for me to watch that? And what happens if we only want to watch the nefarious or the death defying or the really aggressive or the sexual or sensual? It just, ugh. Yeah, it's a really pretty scary world if we spend too much time on the things that don't make a big impact in our lives.
Well, and I just say, like, of real people who and who you trust and who you come to know, you can't have too many. It's the people you don't know and the impersonal forces that I think you need to minimize. So I don't think necessarily, I almost think that Facebook groups and a lot of social media can be a force for good if you are using it to communicate with real human beings. Look at what we do. We use Facebook, we use Zoom, we use Instagram, we use Spotify, we use these things that all have social media aspects to them. But I would hope that we aren't exactly getting rich off this.
Have you checked our account recently, Tony? Yeah, I'm not sure that's true.
Speak for yourself, you guys. I'm getting rich off this. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
You and your AI bots.
Right. So, I would just say, I consume social media. I'm an avid podcast listener. But it's the scroll of strangers that you need to treat with absolute skepticism. It's the message boards, the anonymous message boards, and I still use most social media platforms, and I perhaps naively assume that because they do a pretty good job of giving me. If you look at my social media feed, it's all motorcycles and 49ers. And history people, So I get a pretty steady stream of. I can tell you what Deebo Samuel's son looked like on his last birthday, because I follow every 49er on Instagram. Maybe it influences me to like them more, but I don't know. I already like them. I already like the 49ers an awful lot. So, I'm pretty excited about, I want to know when Triumph is releasing a new motorcycle, even because I love their motorcycles. So there's not all advertising is bad or evil, and there's a good way of doing it, but a lot of it has to do with, what is that particular corporate culture, or who is that individual, and is there someone, an editor? And I still think the most important thing that I do is I still get a paper newspaper. It's the most expensive thing that I pay for, is I still pay for the paper Wall Street Journal. And I do it because precisely so that I read articles that aren't curated for me. That
Well, they're curated by editors who may have shame, but
they aren't personally curated for me.
Right. Okay.
Some editors said, what is it? Some editors sit and think about every single day, what is the most important stuff that you need to know? And then they put all of that stuff together, but it's not personally curated for me.
Right.
And because the articles that I read today are all things that if I were to go on my news media scroll or something, none of this stuff is mentioned, because all AI knows is to give you more of what you've already done.
Right.
But as a human being, I have other interests, and I do find it interesting to study, how Southwest scrambles to restart their regular schedule, and how higher interest rates are threatening the U.S. renovation boom. Those are stories that would have never showed up in my, a news feed curated for me.
Yeah, excellent points. All right, we are over time. Tony, last question or comment for us on today's discussion?
Yeah, two. One is that story that the professor just mentioned about the Southwest, and the whole thing about how that's all kind of, the whole computer systems are crashing because of antiquity of coding and things like that. That is a huge issue that runs rampant through our federal government. We have all kinds of issues with that. So I'm interested in that. I think that's something. And then the other thing is a personal thing. So I've been tinkering around with Instagram, like reels and posts and things like that. I created a reel, which I don't know. I was just tinkering around with something. I posted it, and 170 people, unbeknownst to me, have now viewed it and liked it. And that is the weirdest thing in the entire world to me. Like that but that's what a part of what we're talking about. It's just this like, I'm like, how did that happen? And how do I feel about these people viewing I did put it out on social media, but I thought it would just go to my friends and they'd think it was funny and like it or whatever. But these are 168 people that are outside my audience, not friends of mine. I'm like, that is so bizarre, but it constantly is happening, like where content is being pushed out to people through some algorithm that's either good or bad. I don't know if it's good or bad. Are these people nefarious? Are they going to start wanting to know more about me? It just is a personal experience relating to what Professor Tootle was talking about. So
I was really pleased when I talked to a couple people over the last weeks when we were out, catching up with old friends. And I was really pleased with how many people said that they listened to this on Spotify. Apparently people are going back and listening to old episodes, which I also find interesting that if we don't put out an episode, they'll go back and listen to old ones just because
Well, I'll take that as a compliment versus a critique that they need to get a dog.
Well, it's a great listing for when you're walking your dog.
There you go.
It's just like you're walking your dog with three friends.
Yeah, there you go. All right, Tony, thank you for producing our shows. We really appreciate you. Professor, as always, thanks for your thoughts. I'm glad to have done a year end. We'll talk about next year and how we can continue to try to provide benefit to people or society or both. But until then, just know that you have my eternal thanks and gratitude.
Hey, thanks to both of you guys. Really appreciate both of you.
All right.
Cheers.
Have a great day, gentlemen.
happy 2023.
Happy New Year.
Yep.
Yeah.